Okay, so 10 miles, right? Sounds pretty simple, but it can actually feel totally different depending on how you travel.
Yeah.
And that's what we're looking at today.
Hmm.
This article, uh, how long will it take me to travel 10 miles? Quick update by Artado.
Okay.
Got me thinking about all the ways to travel those 10 miles. Cars, walking, cycling, public transport, even running and flying.
It is interesting to think about, isn't it? We always think about where we're going,
Yeah.
but we forget about the actual journey.
Yeah, and there's so many things we don't even think about.
Right.
Like, obviously, traffic is bad when driving, but what about the psychological effects of sitting in it?
Mm.
And how, like, city design can actually make you walk slower.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I mean, you don't even think about that until, you're stuck in a crowd
Right.
and the crosswalks are like really short or something.
Yeah.
Or there's like construction everywhere.
Yeah, and that's not even considering things like the environment. Or, like, if you have bad memories from traveling.
Yeah, yeah. Like being car sick as a kid or having a terrible flight. Yeah.
Okay, well, there's a lot to talk about, so let's start with the basics.
Okay.
The most common way people think about 10 miles driving. Ideally, you're doing 60 on the highway, and you're there in 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's the dream. But in the real world, you never really get those ideal conditions.
Yeah.
Even just like stopping at lights in a city can easily make that 20 minutes.
Oh, for sure. I've definitely been late because I thought it would be faster.
Yep.
Artado mentioned Google Maps and Waze for avoiding traffic, which I definitely do too.
Those apps are like essential these days. They take into account the actual conditions and
Mhm.
find you the best route. But, have you noticed that traffic can really change your mood?
Oh, totally. If I'm already running late and hit a traffic jam,
Yeah.
it just ruins my whole day.
Right. And, I mean, on the other hand, like a nice scenic drive can actually make the whole trip better. But we forget about that when we're just focused on getting there.
So true. And speaking of enjoying the trip, let's talk about walking those 10 miles.
Now, that's a different way to travel.
Yeah.
10 miles on foot.
It sounds like a lot,
It is.
but Artado makes it sound kind of nice.
Yeah, it forces you to slow down. At an average walking speed of 3 to 4 miles an hour, it would take you like 2.5 to 3.5 hours to go 10 miles.
Wow. That's a good chunk of time. What's good about that?
Well, for one, there's no traffic.
True.
And it's amazing exercise. You could burn like 700 to 1,200 calories.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm already more interested. But beyond the physical stuff, is there any mental benefit?
Yeah. Artado talked about using that time to just think.
Yeah.
Enjoy the scenery, be present in the moment, like a walking meditation.
That's a good way to put it.
And you notice things you totally miss in a car.
I can see that.
Yeah.
But 10 miles is still a pretty long walk.
Yeah.
Any tips for someone actually doing it?
Oh, definitely. The most important thing is comfortable shoes. You do not want to get blisters.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to stay hydrated, especially if it's hot out. Maybe bring some snacks, too.
Good advice. Now, what about something faster than walking, but less stressful than driving?
You think in bikes.
Exactly. What about cycling?
Cycling, yeah, that's a good middle ground. You're moving at a decent speed, usually 10 to 15 miles an hour for a casual cyclist. So those 10 miles would take you like 40 to 60 minutes.
That's not bad at all. Get some exercise, fresh air, and you're there pretty quickly. But I imagine the type of terrain matters a lot.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Hills can really slow you down.
Of course.
And even a little headwind can make it feel way harder.
I hadn't even considered wind. I guess
Yeah.
all these little things can really add up.
Right.
What about the bike itself? Does having fancy gear make a difference?
It can, actually. A good bike that's properly maintained with the right tire pressure can make you feel like you're flying. And then there's this whole thing called cadence.
Cadence, what's that?
Basically, it's how fast you're pedaling. A higher cadence pedaling faster actually distributes the work across your muscles better.
Huh.
It's kind of counterintuitive, but it can make you a way more efficient cyclist.
So it's not just about having a nice bike. You actually have to know how to use it right.
Exactly. And just like with driving, it's smart to plan your route in advance.
Right.
And, with cycling, you can use apps like Strava to avoid big hills
Yeah.
or roads that aren't safe.
Safety first. Okay, now let's talk about a mode of transport that can be a bit of a wild card. Public transportation, it could be super easy
Right.
or a total disaster.
Yeah, public transportation is its own beast. You're dealing with schedules, transfers, and the constant possibility of delays.
Yeah. I've definitely waited for a bus that never came.
Oh, yeah.
Or missed a connection. It's the worst.
Nope, it's all part of the experience. But let's be specific. A 10-mile bus ride could take you like 20 minutes, or it could easily be over an hour.
Wow. Okay. And what about trains or the subway? Are they more reliable for 10 miles?
They can be a lot faster, especially if you're going through a city center where they have their own tracks. But you have to factor in the time it takes to walk to and from the stations.
Right, that last mile problem. It can really add up. It seems like with public transport, you really have to plan ahead.
Oh yeah, definitely. Check schedules, have backup plans.
Yeah.
We're lucky to have real-time tracking apps now, though. They can really help with delays and changes.
Technology saves the day again. Okay, now for our listeners who like a challenge, what about running 10 miles?
Now we're talking about a whole different kind of journey. For those who are into it, running 10 miles is definitely a rewarding but tough thing to do. Most runners go at about 6 to 8 miles an hour.
Okay.
So that would take you something like 1.25 to 1.75 hours.
Wow. That's a serious run. Artado said they found it harder than they expected. Any advice for someone thinking about doing that?
Yeah. The most important thing is to train properly and pace yourself. You don't want to go out too fast and then hit a wall.
Yeah, gotta listen to your body. What about staying hydrated during such a long run?
Anything over an hour, you should definitely be bringing water or energy gels.
Okay.
And make sure to warm up properly and stretch afterwards to avoid injury.
Good tips. Now, last but not least, let's talk about something a little crazy, flying 10 miles. Kind of ridiculous, right?
It does sound a bit over the top, I'll admit. But Artado does have a point. Imagine you have to cross a big lake or travel between islands.
Okay, yeah,
In those cases, flying might be the only way to go.
that makes sense. But even if the flight itself is short, getting to and from the airport takes forever.
Exactly. Checking in, going through security, waiting at the gate, all that can easily add an hour or more to your travel time.
And not to mention the cost. Flying's rarely the cheapest option.
True. It really highlights the importance of thinking about how practical and efficient each option is. Speaking of short flights, though, did you know the shortest commercial flight in the world is only 1.7 miles long?
No way. That's crazy. Where is it?
It's between two islands in Scotland called Westray and Papa Westray.
Ah.
The flight takes less than 2 minutes.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already, but clearly there's so much more to consider than just distance when you're talking about traveling 10 miles.
Absolutely. It's not just about the method of transportation itself, it's about all these other factors. The hidden costs, the impact on the environment, and even the emotional side of things.
Right. And we're going to dig deeper into all of that in the next part of our deep dive. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. So we talked about all the ways to travel 10 miles, but now I'm really interested in those hidden costs you mentioned.
Yeah, what exactly did you mean by that?
Well, it's about going beyond just the upfront costs, like gas or a bus ticket,
Okay.
and thinking about all the other things that can affect the whole experience.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Let's think about driving. Obviously, you have to pay for gas and maybe tolls, but then you have things like parking.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in cities, that can get really expensive. For sure, parking garages are the worst.
And then there's always the chance your car could break down.
Ugh, don't even say that.
You know, you could end up with a huge repair bill that messes up your budget and your whole schedule.
Yeah, travel nightmare, for sure. So even with driving, there are all these hidden costs lurking around.
Definitely. And it's not just about money either. Think about all the time we spend sitting in traffic. That's time you could be doing something else you enjoy.
Right, like it's a trade-off. We're giving up time and money to get somewhere quickly or to have the convenience of driving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that trade-off is different for everyone, depending on their priorities.
Okay, so we've got the money and the time. What other hidden costs are there?
Well, one that's becoming more and more important is the environmental impact.
Right.
Artado doesn't really talk about this in their article,
Yeah.
but it's something we should definitely consider.
Absolutely. Sustainability is so important, and transportation plays a big part in our carbon footprint. Exactly. And if we're talking about 10 miles, some ways of traveling are way more eco-friendly than others.
Okay, so which ones are the best for the environment?
Walking and cycling are the clear winners. No emissions at all.
Yeah.
And you're getting exercise, which is good for you too.
Plus, you actually get to experience your surroundings, like we talked about before.
Right. And public transportation is pretty good too compared to driving alone.
Yeah, because you have a lot of people sharing one vehicle.
Exactly. And lots of cities are switching to electric buses and trains, which is even better for the environment.
That's good to hear. What about driving then? Where does that fall?
Sadly, driving alone, especially in a gas-powered car, is the worst for the environment out of all the ways we've talked about.
Yeah, I figured. All those emissions from burning gas really have an impact.
They do, but I mean, even with driving, you can make better choices, like carpooling or driving an electric car.
So even if you can't completely ditch your car, there are still ways to be more eco-friendly.
For sure. And as technology keeps getting better, we'll hopefully have even more options.
Okay, so we've covered practicality, hidden costs, the environment. But what about the emotional side of traveling 10 miles? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah. That's interesting. How we feel and what we think about the trip.
Exactly. Artado mentioned using their walk to reflect and think. I thought that was really interesting. Sometimes the journey itself is just as important as getting to your destination.
That's true. Different ways of traveling can make you feel different things and see things in a different way.
For example, walking lets you really slow down and notice all the little details around you.
Right. And cycling can make you feel free and exhilarated.
Mm-hmm.
You're moving and connected to your body and the world. And public transport gives you a glimpse into other people's lives.
Yeah, it's like people watching on a bigger scale.
Exactly. It's
Huh.
all about the different stories we create during the trip.
It's not just about going somewhere, it's about what happens along the way.
Exactly. And that brings us to another point. Our personal preferences and past experiences really influence how we choose to travel.
Right, this is where it gets personal.
Yeah. Our backgrounds, comfort levels, even our memories of past trips can affect our choices.
Like someone who grew up in a city with great public transport might be totally comfortable on buses and trains.
Right. While someone who's always lived in a rural area might prefer driving their own car.
It's about familiarity and control.
And then you have those bad experiences. Like if you had a horrible time on a crowded bus once,
Oh, yeah.
you might never want to take the bus again.
Or on the other hand, maybe you have amazing memories of biking through a park.
Right.
And now you always choose to cycle whenever you can.
Exactly. It's fascinating how all these personal things mix with the practical stuff when we decide how to travel.
It shows just how complicated human behavior is. Our own stories and experiences shape how we interact with the world, even in simple things, like choosing how to travel 10 miles.
It really does. And speaking of stories, let's talk about the future of transportation. Technology's changing so fast. I'm curious how it'll change how we travel, even just those short distances.
Yeah, let's get into it. What's coming next? What could change the way we do these 10-mile trips?
Well, everyone's talking about self-driving cars. Autonomous vehicles could really change how we commute,
Right.
make it safer, more efficient, maybe even more fun.
Imagine just relaxing in your car while it drives you to work.
I know, it sounds almost too good to be true, but I mean, it's getting more and more likely that we'll be seeing self-driving cars everywhere pretty soon.
Wow. It's exciting, but also a little scary. What about other ways of getting around apart from cars? Anything new there?
Definitely. Electric scooters and bikes are getting super popular in cities.
They're everywhere now.
They're a convenient and eco-friendly way to zip around, especially for shorter trips.
And they look fun to ride, too.
Exactly. And as batteries get better and there are more places to charge them, we're going to be seeing more and more of those electric scooters and bikes.
Awesome. What about public transport? Any cool new things happening there?
Public transport is getting a high-tech upgrade too. Lots of cities are trying out smart transit systems. These systems use data to make routes better, reduce wait times, and give people more personalized info.
That sounds amazing, like having a personal assistant for your commute.
Exactly. And some systems are even using AI
Oh, wow.
to predict how many people will be traveling, adjust schedules,
Wow.
and make sure buses and trains are where they need to be.
That's amazing. Technology is really changing public transport for the better.
Yeah. As these innovations keep developing, we're going to see some incredible public transport systems in the future.
So the future of transportation sounds pretty exciting. Lots of cool stuff on the horizon.
It really is. It'll be interesting to see how all these trends change our relationship with travel in the coming years.
Okay, before we get too carried away talking about flying cars and stuff, let's come back to the present. What have we learned from this deep dive into traveling 10 miles?
Well, it's been quite a journey. We've looked at practical things, hidden costs, environmental impact, the emotional side of things, and even the future.
Yeah, we've covered a lot. And it's clear that even something as simple as 10 miles is actually really complicated.
Absolutely. It's not just about getting from one place to another.
Right.
It's about understanding all the different ways to travel, making smart choices that fit our values, and appreciating the whole experience, even the unexpected parts.
And it's about understanding that our choices matter, even for short trips.
Yes, They affect everyone around us.
Yeah.
Our communities, the environment, and our responsibility for creating a better future.
So to wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
let's encourage our listeners to keep learning about transportation.
Right.
Be open to new ideas and make choices that align with their values.
Exactly. Whether you're walking, cycling, driving, using public transport, or even flying, every trip, even a short one, is a chance to learn, connect, and create your own story.
And who knows, maybe someday we'll be talking about our 10-mile adventures in self-driving cars or zooming around in air taxis.
Wouldn't that be amazing? We'll be back soon for the final part of our deep dive into traveling 10 miles. Stay tuned.
We're back for the last part of our 10-mile journey. We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
We have. From the practicalities of different travel methods to those hidden costs and environmental impacts. We even talked about the emotional side of traveling.
And we even peeked into the future a bit with those self-driving cars and all.
Yeah.
But before we wrap things up completely, I wanted to go back to something you mentioned earlier, that idea of perspective.
Ah, yes. Perspective. It's a really interesting way to think about these 10-mile trips because what seems like a long or short journey is totally different for everyone.
Right. Like if you commute 50 miles every day,
Yeah,
10 miles might feel like nothing to you.
exactly. But for someone who walks or bikes everywhere, those 10 miles are a much bigger deal.
And it goes beyond just your daily routine too, right? Like how old you are, your physical abilities, where you grew up, those all affect how you see distance.
Absolutely. Imagine you're a little kid.
Yeah.
10 miles might seem like a huge adventure full of unknowns.
But for someone who runs marathons all the time,
Right.
10 miles is just another training run.
And your culture can play a part too. In some places, walking long distances is totally normal.
Yeah.
But in others, it's not very common.
So even something as simple as 10 miles can have so many different meanings to different people.
Exactly. It just shows that there's no single right answer when it comes to understanding our experiences, even something like traveling 10 miles.
And it reminds us to be more empathetic.
Mm-hmm.
What might seem easy for one person could be really hard for someone else.
That's a really important point. And it also shows how awesome diversity is. Having all these different perspectives makes the world a more interesting place.
Yeah, totally agree. So as we finish up our deep dive into these 10-mile trips, I think the biggest takeaway is that it's not just about the destination. It's about the journey itself.
Exactly. It's about the choices we make, how we experience those 10 miles, and what those choices say about us.
And I think it's also about recognizing that even seemingly simple things can be surprisingly complex and thought-provoking.
Definitely. So, to our listeners, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep challenging your own assumptions about the world. And whether you're walking, cycling, driving, taking public transport, or flying, remember that every journey, no matter how short, is an opportunity to learn something new.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of traveling 10 miles. We'll be back soon with another interesting topic. Until then, safe travels.